quality assurance for contingency plans. It's a bit of a misnomer because, I mean, whoever tests their contingency plan, especially at scale, and I kind of have the feeling that we should talk about this more often. I don't know how many of you fall under the new happy German European legislation like NIS2, DORA, CRITIS, and whatever. But all these things essentially boil down to a simple thing. You shall do your IT more professional and spend much more money on it. Yeah, tough luck. And oh yes, NIS2 is coming, and a lot of my customers are thinking about that. Don't worry.
I absolutely agree. We just talked to a NIS specialist. He said we have 1.5 years.
Yep, which is like nothing.
That's not a lot.
Which is like nothing. So what I want to bring to you today is essentially an idea that is proven in reality for solving the restore problem, solving specifically the RTO problem. And my way is called the no restore solution. So I don't like restoring. So I was thinking about how to get rid of that because I don't like it. So let's talk about business continuity. If you need a quick definition of business continuity, here is one. I would like to summarize it as stay in business no matter what. And that's the job of us in IT, to enable the business to stay in business no matter what happens in IT or elsewhere. And that's why I love IT, because it's important. So let's quick recap on the kind of basics we need to talk about. So obviously there's a timeline. We take a backup, everything is fine. We take another backup, let's say a day later, everything is still fine. And then we take another backup and it blows up. The whole system blows up. Your AWS accounts get hacked and exploited, taken away, encrypted, deleted, whatever. I mean, the beauty about cloud is it's just a few commands to delete everything you have in one go. And it's really easy to do that in an automated fashion. So what typically happens after disaster is a lot of panic, a lot of chaos. And there's a very non-linear way, typically, how to get back into a partial recovery. Nobody does a full recovery at this stage. You always do a partial recovery. You try to get up the so-called critical systems, important stuff, whatever that means. After that, you have a bit of more, less chaotic stuff happening. You do get eventually to the state of mostly recovered. In my experience, people who have been hit hard never fully recover. There's always a gap between what you had before and what you keep on going into the future. So obviously this is the recovery point objective, which is essentially how old is the recovery data. And this is the recovery time objective, which is like how long does it take to recover. And I like to translate the RPO as stuff we have. Like that's the stuff you have in your pocket, in your safe, on your tapes, in the little suitcase. And the RTO is actually stuff you need to do. So it's like having backups that then give you a certain RPO, and the actions you perform, the tasks you do, whatever you make it happen, that's your RTO. So far, I think everybody actually knows that. I just wanted to set the scene. Now, what's the problem? I believe we have too much data. And we have too much data. And I didn't make that up. This is actually something I found. For example, I found an article that mentions that the world will store 200 zettabytes of data by 25, which is like in a month. The article brings a lot of evidence to support that claim, and I didn't know how much that is, so I asked some AI to write me 200 zettabytes, and that's how it looks. And even if you convert it to terabyte, it's still a lot. Now, hopefully, none of you has that much data in the data center. But looking at something more tangible, it looks like the amount of storage required for a typical enterprise application has been exploding over the last decade. This is an exponential growth. It's not linear. It's really going up like crazy. So this actually also reflects all my personal experiences that the amount of data we kind of manage goes up like crazy. And each time I buy a laptop, even if I get the large disk, later I think it was too small. So somehow data explodes. And the next problem we have is we don't have time to restore all that data. Because, we talk about backup disaster recovery. So the more data we have, the more data we need to restore. And here's a bit of information I found about kind of the evolution of disaster recovery. Meaning, how did we do disaster recovery? And the numbers are a bit optimistic. I personally believe most people are, by this scale, still somewhere in the range of the 2000s or 2010s, meaning we use automation, but I have met very few organizations that really go all the way into near real-time recovery, replication, continuous kind of data distribution and so on, because apparently it's really, really hard to implement. And again, what happened here is that the RPO and RTO times, they went really, really, really down. Like we have much less time to recover our systems, even though we have much more data to recover. So for me as an architect, that's a huge conflict. And let me ask you, how did your storage size increase over the last 10 years? And how did your recovery requirements, RPO, RTO, actually decrease in the same time? And it's an honest question. Any examples you would like to share? Let's go a little bit further into the details. Just for illustrational purposes, I constructed a catastrophic SAN failure. I assume some people still have actual on-premise tech. Bit of context, imagine 140 terabyte of storage. Nowadays, not even a full rack, not much in terms of hardware. Imagine the latest generation LTO tapes. And look, a full restore takes about 5 days, at least, minimum, if nothing goes wrong. And that's the problem. Because is it okay for the company to have 1 week recovery time? Assuming, your storage had a major outage, something blew up, whatever. What does your company actually do with the external relationships, communication, external processes, and so on? You can't just stop the world around your company and assume they wait for you to recover. So new data, new transactions keep happening even when the systems aren't there. And this is still the happy case of just the central storage going away. Imagine if all your physical servers, local hard disks are also gone, or, ransomware encrypted and you have to do a full setup from scratch. And this is, in my opinion, a real significant problem, because whatever you do, how would you test it? How would you validate that the projected recovery time is actually correct? That you don't go around telling everybody, hey, we're done in a week, but in reality it would be a month, because there's so much stuff that you didn't test, then you don't know where it fails. Because, in IT, if you didn't test it, it's probably broken. That's the golden rule. So that's the question that was really bothering me for a long time. And I think in the end, a service level agreement around disaster recovery is essentially your RPO, the RTO on top of that, and then a lot of, let's hope for the best. And this let's hope for the best is, of course, a bit fuzzy, And if you go to your top management and say, well, our SLA includes a lot of let's hope for the best, maybe that's not a good conversation to have. So my idea for solving this problem is, okay, let's say the RTO and the uncertainty is the actual big problem here that we need to fix. And my idea is simply, let's get rid of the restore time. And let's exercise the restore process all the time. I might have a bit of a background in software engineering and automating stuff. So what does it mean? We need to restore every backup immediately after taking it. And we need to create a replacement system, make sure that the replacement system is potentially ready for usage. And then, instead of try to restore when the problem happens, we go and instead just switch to a working and verified recovery system. And we know that this works because we've been doing it all the time. It's not new. We essentially take the disaster and turn the disaster procedure from an emergency process into a regular daily task that happens all the time. And that is my way for fixing the RTO and essentially taking out the risk and the uncertainty. So how does the no restore solution look in practice? Well, we still take backups, but then every backup is followed by a fully automated restore validation into a recovery system. And this recovery system is there, ready for action in case we need it. So following the same example as before, we take another backup, it explodes like before, but then we just pivot, we switch to the recovery system, and that gives us a very quick recovery time. And the recovery time is literally just, starting the replacement. And that's my opinion, like my vision for how to solve this conflict between an ever-increasing amount of data to recover, on one hand, and an ever-decreasing requirement, like for lower RTOs and recovery times, where a company might lose a lot of money if the recovery time takes too much time. And the whole story I'm trying to tell you is look into automating your recovery procedures as a way to solve the disaster recovery main problems. Unfortunately, there's a bit more to that, but today this is kind of the main story I would like you to take away. So things to also consider is we do need to reduce the RPO, the recovery point objective, meaning how much time we go into the past when we recover our data. So the typical thing you do is snapshots, replication, and offsite. Essentially in that combination. Snapshotting is super difficult. We just talked about it. Think about snapshotting a connected system of applications. Think about, company-wide synchronized state. And trust me, snapshotting is a problem. And I would recommend to take snapshotting and restoring data, or like continuing from a snapshot, to be part of the system design requirements. The other thing is offsite really means not there where you run production. So if you operate in the cloud, please do offsite backups outside of the cloud, in your data center, in your basement, whatever, not in the cloud. If you run on-premise, please consider using the cloud as offsite backup. Why? Because in the cloud you have more things you can do with the data than just having the data in a bunch of tape drives sitting in a bank safe. The other thing to consider is business critical systems. My personal observation is there's a lot of illusion of clarity around business critical, meaning people doing paper tabletop exercises looking at process definitions in Signavio or whatever, they will sit and say, well, these are the mission critical, business critical systems. But the reality is different. The reality is employees use other tools to complement missing functionality in these core systems. And if these other tools aren't there, the business doesn't work because employees always solve their problems. And also, tech evolves faster than paper. So if you did a business impact analysis 3 years ago, it's outdated. And your business critical systems today are more than what you saw back then. So my personal take is I'd rather treat everything as business critical. And if not, I would suggest, okay, let's turn it off for a week and see who cries. And if nobody cries, then it's indeed not business critical. Then please think about SaaS applications. In most organizations, SaaS applications are actually business critical. But with SaaS applications, you actually factually do not possess your own data. You have an entitlement to it, you could sue the vendor to give you your data, but you don't possess it. It's not in your pocket. So the fact that SaaS applications often don't give you a backup in combination with the fact that you don't possess your data creates a huge problem. And even if they have an export, then typically this export can't be imported to recreate the SaaS application with your data and configuration as it was before. So my question to you is, if you use SaaS, what's your RPO and RTO and the contingency plan for this SaaS application and whatever it does? The example Ia gave us before with the NAT gateway external IPs is exactly such an example of a SaaS application. You cannot recover external IPs you got from AWS. You don't have control over them. You don't possess them. You don't have anything. If they're gone, you start again from scratch and need to literally configure everything for the new IPs. And here's my pitch. I believe there's a huge return of invest for automating everything around disaster recovery. I believe it's much cheaper to develop automation than to actually run so many business continuity tests as you would need to prove anything around the quality of your disaster recovery readiness. I also believe that with automation, the scope of systems that you can cover is much bigger than what you would cover in a manual exercise. I believe that only with automation you can come to a moment where you cover most of the systems in your organization with a meaningful contingency plan. I'm not even saying the best, just a meaningful one. And finally, I'm very sure and certain that only automation allows you to actually prove the quality of your contingency plan. Why? Because if you automate it, you can let it run without human attention and doing it. And then you have an automated system that tells you, yes, the contingency plan actually works. In software engineering, we call that test-driven development. This is a lot. And I know that disaster recovery is like an insurance. It's expensive. You hope you never need it. But then when you do need it, you're happy to have a good insurance. So I know that these conversations are super difficult to have. What I can only suggest for us IT people is to come and say, hey, we have a solution, and the solution is called automation. And that actually fixes the problem. So all of that isn't fantasy. There's some stuff I did over the last years. For example, Relax and Recover is an open source project fully automating Linux, bare metal restore or disaster recovery. I started it in 2006. I'm still actively developing it. If you run Linux servers that are not fully automated with all their data and so on, I'd strongly encourage you to look at that as a way to create kind of a base layer of disaster recovery protection for any sort of Linux servers, even including a full integration into all major commercial backup tools. My first touch with really automating asymmetric disaster recovery models was actually a very interesting project to create a high available file server at an organization that had a 2-digit terabyte SAN storage. And the problem was they were afraid that the hardware would fail, the server hardware. So I built them a system that would allow the same system to actually run off the server hardware, like with a lot of performance, and alternatively run as a virtual machine on VMware. But it was the same system with the same data stored in the central SAN system, so that the failover scenario for a hardware failure would actually be literally 2 minutes starting the virtual machine. The same if the central storage would fail, like 50 terabyte central storage, then the hardware had local storage attached that contained a full copy of that, rsync replicated all the time, which could be started again within 5 minutes to provide a slower version of the same data, same file server, as a way of quickly recovering the file service. And it was important for them because the entire organization was running off that file server. And this was a very interesting project that shows that you can use automation to really achieve super low RPOs and RTOs. Many of you probably use VMware somewhere. So I wrote an open source project to automate VMware instant recovery based off their VCB product. And years later, they turned that into a VMware product, and Veeam now also has something called recovery orchestration. These are interesting tools that allow you to fully automate the disaster recovery process for VMware virtualized environments, including offsite recovery and a lot of interesting features that really go into reducing the RPO and RTO and ensuring a lot of business continuity at, by the way, a platform level. Because for the systems running on top, it's nearly invisible that this protection is in place. Talking about SaaS, I actually did a detailed in-depth analysis of disaster recovery for Google Workspace, one of the 2 major Office SaaS providers. And the bad news, it's actually impossible. There is no disaster recovery. If you use Google Workspace, please look at it. It will open your eyes. I do suggest a solution for partial disaster recovery, but in the end, using cloud-based solutions carries the penalty of not having a full disaster recovery if you need it. I believe that with Microsoft 365, it's quite similar, even though I haven't done the in-depth research. And finally, test-driven development is my approach for solving a lot of risk problems, meaning we have risk, uncertainty. So my way would be to say, okay, let's do automated testing around that in order to build confidence and reduce the risk that we perceive there. To summarize, and I will show you a link for all this content. The idea for getting quality insurance for contingency plans is very simple. Number 1, automate everything. Automation is the way to eliminate risk and uncertainty. Number 2, the trick is switching to a ready recovery system to quickly recover from outages. That's the trick, how you can really drive down your recovery times. And finally, think about test-driven development for business continuity as the kind of mental model for developing your own business continuity management plans, exercises, and measures. I know it's software engineering and not paper, but I can promise you that in the end, the result will be much better. With that, I would like to come to an end. I hope we have a bit of time for questions. The link in the upper right corner leads you to my homepage where you find all this material, all the links again. Just search for it. Also, this talk, these slides are already on my homepage under publications. So you can download it, click on the links. And I hope that some of these materials will be useful for you. Happy to support you there, obviously. Happy for a conversation. Please ask questions. Please tell me stuff that doesn't work. I'm really happy to learn about things that I can solve. Thank you very much.